All right, good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to another short war summary. And today we have breaking news coming out of Ukraine that the German foreign minister, while on a visit there, got chased down by a Russian drone while driving in a convoy in the Mykolaiv region and had to flee the area due to that safety concern. So, a very big story on that front. And we're also learning that Ukraine has announced some very big plans coming up for the Crimean Bridge in the future. And we're also hearing for the first time about Ukrainian losses in the war. So, let's go ahead and jump right into our first article of the day, which is from Nexta on Twitter. And it says here, a Russian drone chased the German foreign minister in the Mykolaiv region, according to the German newspaper BILD. And according to the correspondent, the German delegation was planning to visit a desalination plant about 50 kilometers from the front line. And along the way, a recon UAV approached the convoy of cars, after which there's usually an air attack, and the drivers tried to get away from the drone, but it continued its pursuit of the convoy anyway. But eventually, after some evasive driving, the convoy managed to break away, but the visit had to be canceled due to that security reason. And I'm not sure what the Russians were thinking by doing this, because this is a red line you simply don't cross. You do not target or surveil these diplomats while they're in the war zone, because if they end up getting hurt or killed by that Russian drone, that could spark some major international consequences and potentially start a major war. So the Russians were really tempting fate here with that one. I'm not sure what their overall goal was. I'm not sure if they were really crazy enough to try to assassinate the German foreign minister, which to me would seem very extreme, or if they were simply trying to scare her. I'm sort of leaning toward the last option. I would think that the Russians, even though they're incompetent and stupid, wouldn't be that stupid to actually target the foreign minister here. That would be next level stupid. But with that, we're jumping into our next article, which is from the Euromaidan Press. And we're learning here that not only did the drone surveil them, but it also triggered the airstrike alarms in the convoy, which alerted the drivers to the threat in the first place. So just adding some more context to a very disturbing situation that the Russians have carried out as of today. So with that, we're jumping into our next article here, which is from the Kyiv Independent on Twitter. And this is the first time ever we're hearing Zelensky basically admit to Ukrainian losses. And it says here, Zelensky says 31,000 Ukrainian soldiers have been killed throughout the entirety of the Russia-Ukraine war thus far. And first off on this, we have to recognize that it is very unfortunate and sad to hear that 31,000 Ukrainians have lost their lives up to this point in this war, which was totally avoidable if Putin wasn't a madman and invaded territory that wasn't his. And it's very sad, and I must acknowledge that to begin with, because we're about to jump into a somewhat cold analysis of the numbers, and I want to preface it with a little bit of humanity here, that any losses are bad, but it does pale in comparison to the Russian losses, which brings us to our next post here, which is from us on Twitter, @It'sTheEnforcer. And it says, for every 31 Ukrainian troops killed in battle, 180 Russian troops are killed in return. And in terms of historical data, that is an incredible testament to Ukraine's fighting ability. And it truly is, because the Russians are losing troops at a rate significantly higher than the Ukrainians. And considering the Russians have supposedly had a bigger and better army, or we were led to believe that before the war started, the Russians are losing in spectacular fashion. But with that, we're jumping into our next post here, which is from Knoll Reports. And in this post, we're learning that in 2024, there are some new surprises awaiting the enemies in Crimea. And this is a statement from Budanov, and he says, I do not recommend the civilian population to use the Crimean Bridge, because of those surprises which are coming up. So we can see here that the Ukrainian intelligence division is telling folks basically that we're coming again to get that bridge, and it is coming down this time. And we know that the Crimean Bridge is a major propaganda target for the Ukrainians, because they've targeted it in the past using some of those suicide boats as well as a truck filled with explosives. So it appears that they're still after the bridge, and they're also going to make sure that those Russian vacationers there in Crimea aren't going to be able to simply cross over it without any fear in mind. So once again, the Ukrainians will hit it, hopefully to the point where the Russians can't repair it, because that would be a big deal and a big blow to Russia's logistics systems. But with that, we're jumping into our next post here, which goes to the Euromaidan Press, and we can see that the UK Prime Minister Sunak is calling for the bolder seizure of frozen Russian assets 2 years into the war. And the G7 countries have access to nearly 300 billion of Russian reserves frozen 2 years ago. However, they note that they have not been used yet to pay Ukraine's aid up to this point. And I really do hope they liquidate this stuff soon, because I'm not sure why we're holding on to it at this point, because we've had plenty of time for due process here. If we want to do it the right way and do all the paperwork and all that, they could have done that by now. So I'm not sure why we're holding on to this $300 billion. We should go ahead and give that to Ukraine because that's essentially free money sitting right there to give back to the victims, which are Ukraine in this war. So I'm with Sunak here. I think that should be liquidated quick and given to Ukraine, especially considering the lack of aid sort of flowing to Ukraine right now temporarily. So I definitely agree with that 100%. But with that, we're moving on to our next post here, which is from Anton Gerashenko on Twitter, and we're learning some information that the chief of the main director of intelligence, Budanov, believes he's discovered about Navalny's death. And we can see here that Budanov says that Navalny really died because of the loose clot, which is what the Russians claimed he died of, and Budanov's now saying that that actually is the case, according to what he knows. And it says here that Russian Telegram channels reported that the body of Alexei Navalny was taken to Moscow, accompanied by his mother, and the possible date of the funeral at the cemetery is February 29th. However, that is not official information as of yet. Now, this comes as somewhat of a shock to me because we have been basically operating on the assumption that Russia killed Navalny in the prison because Navalny had been poisoned before by Putin in an attempt to take his life. That happened back in 2020, and then he was jailed, and then suddenly he died in jail just a few days ago. Or actually about a week ago at this point. So I'm not sure if I really agree with Budanov here, and he really didn't provide any evidence as to why he believes that Navalny actually did die because of a blood clot. I'm not really sure what he could have learned that anyone else doesn't know at this point. However, he is in the Ukrainian intelligence division, so maybe he does know something. But until I see some more evidence, I'm sort of leaning toward Russia did kill him because that would seem to be the logical answer here. But with that, we're jumping into our next post here, which is from Flash News Ukraine. And if you're wondering why there are all of a sudden so many statements from Zelensky and Budanov today coming out in the news, that's because they just got done with a major press conference regarding the war, and they made a lot of very big statements, which gave us a ton of insider information that we didn't know previously. Budanov also said that Russia is preparing a strategic operation to delegitimize the Ukrainian government called, quote-unquote, Smuta. And that very well may be the case. However, I would make the argument that the operation to delegitimize the Ukrainian government has been ongoing for about 2 years now, ever since the war started. I'm not sure how much more of an operation you can get than an entire war breaking out, because Russia's entire goal was to take the land of Ukraine and to also disrupt the Ukrainian government. That's been their plan all along. And to me, that really hasn't changed. So take this post for what you will, but to me, it's really not too big of a shock or really big news because to me, it's sort of been going on for a long time. But with that, we're jumping into our last news article of the day, which is from Flash News Ukraine. And we're learning here that Ukraine has a very powerful plan for 2024, which is obviously not being publicly disclosed due to OPSEC reasons. And this was stated by the Minister of Defense of Ukraine, Rustem Umerov, who says, "We are doing everything possible and impossible to make a breakthrough, and the 2024 plan is already in place. We don't talk about it publicly, but it is a powerful and strong one, and it gives not only hope, but it will also give results in 2024. And I do believe that because with the new leadership under Syrsky, who is the new commander of the armed forces of Ukraine, I think the new strategy will be effective, and it's the new type of vision that's needed to actually get some progress on the front line. So hopefully it does pan out to be what Zelensky thinks it will be, and I have confidence that it will. But with that, that is actually our last news post of the day, so I hope you found this video informative today, and if you have, please press that like button and subscribe to the channel as well, because that greatly helps us out with the YouTube algorithm and helps us get the news out there. And also, if you want to support us financially, you can do so on our Patreon page. The link is in the description below, and you can support us over there. That greatly helps out as well. So thank you all very much for watching, and bye-bye for now.